Hi guys, it's Coach Joe Micela, 2012 Olympic team coach. A little background on who I am and how I got started in all this, Olympic weightlifting and strength and conditioning. Like many people, I was kind of an overweight kid, and most overweight kids don't really realize they're overweight, but I did, at a very young age. I was about 11 years old, maybe 12 years old, and realized, like, dude, you're fat. Okay, I think it was after like the 18,000th time someone, called me fat that I was just like, all right, enough is enough. And I would see some TV shows or commercials and always, admired like the hero in that show was always a muscular guy, whether it be Superman, Tarzan, or somebody. And I remember saying to my mom, like, hey, I think I would like to get a weight set. And I found in the back of a magazine that I was looking at, it was like a Joe Weider weight set. And I said, Mom, is there any way, I could get this? So for Christmas, I got it. I went down to my basement. It came with a little program book. It had pictures of like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Reg Park and Sergio Olivier. It had all these old bodybuilders in there. And I ate it up. I followed everything, that they said in the program, and it talked about eating. And 3 days a week, I went in my basement in New Jersey and I just started cranking it. And I started seeing results. The great thing about when you're young like that, you can see results pretty quickly. But it was one of those things that I controlled it, and then I was also playing sports at the time, and I saw that there was a direct correlation with me getting stronger, and at the same time I started doing some more cardiovascular stuff. I was riding bikes more, I was running more, and I saw a direct correlation to me getting in better shape and me getting stronger and in better cardiovascular shape, and not my performance on the soccer field at the time or in other sports that I was doing. I was like, wow, there's something to this. And after a while, I was like, listen, I need to go to a gym. So I convinced my mom, basically I was like 12 and a half years old, can I start going to like an actual gym? And we found a local gym in town, and and there was a local guy that, that took me under his wing, never forget him, Ralph Pepino. He took me under his wing and he said, okay, here you go, and it was an old world gym in New Jersey. And next thing you know, I just lived in the gym. 5-6 days a week I was there, two and a half hours a day, reading as much as I could about it. And, whether at that time it was mostly, bodybuilding. That was the easiest way to get influence, because I was 12, 13 years old. I really didn't have anything else to go on. But then I saw again how much it was improving. Then I got into sports like wrestling. I got into these other sports that were very physical in nature, and it made a huge difference. And I said, all right, that's my ticket to get better at sports, is to get stronger and to get in better shape. And then all through high school, it just became a passion of mine. There's a direct correlation. I just started reading as much as I can, started reading more. And then it wasn't until when I got to college and I was wrestling in college that I found more about the sport of Olympic weightlifting. Prior to that, I was getting more into powerlifting. I was getting more into the understanding of using those powerlifting movements and the programming of powerlifting. But then when I got into college, I started, found Olympic weightlifting, and it was like, boom, instant connection. And how everything basically started there. It started with that sport and how everything else kind of bounced around off of that. And, whether it be strongman or, powerlifting or Olympic weightlifting, I just found that modality, or that training modality of Olympic weightlifting just fit me perfect. And it helped me the most with my training as a collegiate wrestler, whereas bodybuilding was like, hey, listen, yes, this was good, but it had some deficiencies to it. Powerlifting, yes, it was good, but it had some deficiencies to it. But when I trained more like an Olympic weightlifter and the mindset of the programming and applied it to my training for wrestling, it had the most connection and most carryover. And that's how I started developing my most time and energy towards. And when I got done collegiately wrestling, I had the opportunity and I was offered a position to coach at Arizona State University as an undergraduate student, because I had one more year as an undergraduate left, but I was offered basically a scholarship to coach, which doesn't really happen a whole lot. Usually it's saved for graduate level students that already graduated high school, and then they can come back and do that. But I got it as an undergrad, and I worked my ass off, and I observed even more information, and then was able to actually coach teams. I was very lucky and fortunate. Most undergraduate students don't get that opportunity, but I had teams of my own that I was writing programs for. I was getting after it. And at the same time, I kept learning more about Olympic weightlifting to the point where I started learning the competitive side of it. And then when I got done collegiately, I really started kind of, as an athlete myself, I was like, hey, I'm not done. I want to try to explore Olympic weightlifting. Both, I figured it could be something good. I wasn't competing in wrestling anymore. But early on, I also got the opportunity to coach in the sport of Olympic weightlifting. So I'm trying to compete as an athlete, and then I'm trying to coach. And then at some point I made the decision, listen, my glory days of competing are past. but I'm going to take that energy that I would take from competing as an athlete and put it into coaching. So I came into coaching actually kind of young, and I'm not saying I gave up an opportunity to be an Olympic, caliber weightlifter, but I just made the decision because I can't do both. I was working so much in coaching. I was coaching so much that I was like, I can't devote the same amount of time and energy to developing myself as a lifter, And I just made the choice. I was like, listen, I'm going to put it full into coaching athletes. And then next thing you know, I found the kid, and he did really well. And then I found another kid, and he did really well. Next thing you know, we're competing on the national level. We're medaling at the national level. And at the same time, I was working on my strength and conditioning side and bringing a Division I level mindset of strength and conditioning. I went into the private sector in 2000. Now for the better part of 24, going on 25 years, we've done that. I was able to, coach high school, college strength and conditioning athletes, some professional athletes, and then made the segue into being also a high level, Olympic weightlifting coach, working with kids from the grassroots level and then developing them up, kids that never had an understanding of Olympic weightlifting, and now saying, hey man, you're good enough to do this. And next thing you know, even as a young coach, because I studied my ass off and I put myself and surrounded myself with knowledgeable coaches and asked very pertinent questions, I was able to then have success. Some people said, hey, you got lucky with this kid. I was like, okay, I got lucky with that kid. What about the other kid? What about the other kid? What about the other kid? So, early on, because I didn't grow up in the sport as an athlete, as a weightlifter myself, or came up to it, when I was a young kid, I got shit on, honestly, early on in the coaching world, because I was young and having success. This was, like I said, 24, 25 years ago, people were like, there was a very, tight-knit group of coaches and that were like, hey, you didn't come up through our way of doing this. I was like, yeah, I did it. But I'm here now, and I want to learn. I'm trying to be respectful to you guys, like throw it back, So it took some years to get that, hey, it's one thing you got one kid, that could just be lucky. It's another thing that you keep showing up at all these meets and you keep showing that you're producing, you're doing it the right way. That was what I was striving to show, consistency. And there was a stretch there that every national meet we had somebody. We still do. There was maybe a couple thin years here or there, but we always were showing up, and then we were producing. We're producing medals. We're producing A-session lifters. Then I got to the point where I had international team members. I had junior world team members. I had a junior world medalist. Then I had senior world teams. Then I made 2 athletes on senior world teams. Then next thing you know, we had a top 10 finisher at the senior worlds. Then we had American record breakers. Then it just kept getting better and better. And then ultimately I had an Olympian in 2012. And that athlete, was Sarah Robles. I don't train her anymore, but she went on and competed at 2 more Olympics and won a world championships and medaled at 2 of those Olympics. And I felt that legacy of at least having those athletes throughout the time period, and even to this day, we're still working and still, competing, was always huge. And now in my profession at Performance One, we do a little bit of everything. We are a fully dedicated Olympic weightlifting facility, but we're also a fully dedicated strength and conditioning facility. So kids as young as 7, as our youngest strength and conditioning athlete, we want to be that foundation. We want to be that complete package to an athlete, that your early foundation to your formative teenage years, to your elite level teenage years, to your elite level early 20s. I've been there and I've done that. Some coaches just said, hey, I like working with kids. I like working with older people. I only work with elite level athletes. I've kind of done it all. Do I have one particular group that I like more than other? No. Like I said, I put the same amount of energy into a 7-year-old as I put into an Olympian. Now the expectations are different. The time dedication is different, but my energy is the same. I want to get after that. So now we've expanded our programs here. And now I have other people that help me. Back in the day, I did this all by myself. We were, coaching, I was putting in 13-hour days, sometimes 14-hour days. When I went on my own, I was like, holy crap. I thought I was going to be working less than when I was working as an undergraduate, assistant when I was in college. Like, oh man, we're working like 40-hour, 50-hour, 60-hour weeks when I was in college. Now I'm like, man, that's a freaking half day, when you're working for yourself. Plus, there's even so much more riding on it. Because now it's like, hey, I'm going to pay the bills. How am I going to pay the rent? How am I going to pay to keep the lights on? You're doing a profession that is, at the time, especially 20-something years ago, was a niche thing. So taking those chances was a little bit more challenging. But we made it work over these years, and we've gotten bigger and better and better. So again, I said I've done a lot. I was one of the few coaches that actually made an Olympic team in his 30s. You know, I was a head coach in his 30s, both on the world team level, both at the Pan Ams, junior world level. I put athletes on every conceivable team there is in the sport of Olympic weightlifting within that 24-year career. There's some guys that, you know, like I said, I'm not throwing shade on them. Some guys would be in the sport 30 years. They put one guy on a team 30 years ago, and they keep living off of that one moment. And I'm like, hey, man, like, yes, it was great, but what the fuck did you do since then? You know what I mean? Like, let's keep it going. You may or may not have been really good, you know? And some guys lose it and some guys don't. One thing I've realized is that, you know, my core values are the same. Have I changed some things from 24 years ago? Yeah, I've changed some things. You know, the athletes have changed a little bit. What I could do with some athletes, you know, 20 years ago, I can't do. You're softer now. What? Who said that out loud? Anyway, but it's a different mentality. You know, some of the athletes are better now. Some of the athletes were really, really good then. But you have to change a little bit. The times have changed a little bit. And I think some coaches can't do that. You know, some coaches want to be their friend and this and, you know, wear cool sneakers and, you know, all go out and get beers together. And I made an early decision that I wasn't going to do that. You know, I wanted to be an authoritarian coach because I responded to that. You know, I'm not saying we can't, like, you know, crack a joke here or there or talk nice things, but at the same time, I wanted to separate myself from that friend mentality. They got enough friggin' friends, okay? You know, I felt the best way that I could get the most out of my people and with my mentality was to be that way. You know, it was to be more strict in some areas and hold them more accountable, you know, because some of these guys and girls weren't, you know, and I pushed. You know, the one thing that I will say that I do is I will push your buttons. I will push you to a point that is a breaking point, mentally and physically, because I feel that that's the only way to actually improve. And it's been proven in other major successful programs, both in America, both in and overseas. You know, drugs, no drugs, whatever, you know, yes, drugs make a factor, but for the most part, the athletes that succeed are the athletes that are willing to accept a challenge and to do things that they know is on that fringe of a little bit crazy. And on that point of like, I have to do something I've never done before. You know, especially in the sport of Olympic weightlifting, it's that the bar continuously has to get heavier. It continuously has to be challenged to adapt to that stress. And not a lot of sports can say that. Nothing against swimming, but the water is the water in New York as it is in Philadelphia, as it is in, you know, Florida. A pool water is the same. Now, if you said, hey, the water is gonna get thicker and thicker and thicker. Oh, by the way, when you swim, each lap, you gotta add 10 pounds onto you. It's a little different dynamic to swimming. Nothing against swimming, but it's a completely different animal. You have to constantly stress yourself. Just like they gotta swim faster, we're constantly having to lift heavier and heavier weights. Yeah, you can't stay complacent. And that's one of the greatest things that always kind of compelled me to it, and also is the biggest challenge. But I feel that, you know, I found my calling. I loved college, you know, wrestling. I loved wrestling as a sport, but I found my calling in weightlifting. I take, again, that mentality of weightlifting and wrestling and apply it to my strength and conditioning program here at Performance One, and we've been very successful, and we're going to continue to strive to be successful. So look out for us in 2025.